It's the Schude Talk Show. Yeah, told you you would laugh. Okay, today we are talking to Devon Dickinson, and I wrote a little resume for you. Okay, entrepreneur of several multi-million-dollar businesses, real estate investor, podcaster, philanthropist, world traveler, soccer coach, husband, father of four, and friend to many. How did I do?
Pretty good. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're talking to Devon for a lot of different reasons. First of all, I'm proud to call you my friend. And I'm like, let's get him in the hot seat because you are full of information and really good, mostly good information. So you're an entrepreneur. And I wanted to start off kind of on what that means. Because to me, I always think like entrepreneur, business owner, a little bit different. So I did actually, I'm like, I just kind of used them interchangeably. And I don't know if that's the right thing to do. So I looked it up, and it said business owners tend to be more focused on the day-to-day operations, where entrepreneurs are more focused on the long term and making money in the long run.
Yeah, it's funny because I think a lot of people, what happens is they'll end up in a cycle where they basically have a family business, right? And it's something that you can make great money off of, and you end up with the same routine over and over again. You kind of flatline, you reach a plateau, and you're very comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of business owners end up. And I think the difference between an entrepreneur and a business owner is I think the entrepreneur is always driving for growth and what the next iteration of their business is. And so most of my businesses today look absolutely nothing like what we started them, for the better or worse. And but I think the driving of the change is what will bring ultimate value and kind of what drives an entrepreneur.
So do you think you would be safe to say you started off as a business owner? A small business owner and kind of transformed into the entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think so. I think the very first company I started, in hindsight and reflecting upon it, was just trying to pay the bills. You know.
Yeah.
And you know what it is? I'm like, oh gee, I think I remember when I started. When I started the company, we didn't have any customers at all, right? But I had this really great idea of what we could build it into, but after like 6 weeks, I had no customers. And I got someone that came up to me and they're like, hey, well, I don't want to buy your product, but, will you do this similar thing for me? And I'm like, well, does it pay? And they're like, yeah, great. I'm like, well, sure, I'll do it. And from there, I started to evolve, right? And I was like, okay, I've got to make enough money today to be able to put diapers on the baby because my oldest today was, about a year old, and
no pressure, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's a lot of sleepless nights.
Yeah.
But then it kind of, once we had that foundation, and I knew I could, pay the rent, put diapers on the baby, put food on the table, make the car payments. Then it became like a game. Like, how do we grow this? How do we scale it? And that's when you're willing to make some side bets, and some of them won, some of them lost, but that's how we evolved as a company.
Well, so I guess being a young guy with a young family, how did you go from? I'm assuming you started off working for someone else, like having a steady paycheck. Like, how do you, at that point, and how do you convince your wife this is a good idea to leave something that's so guaranteed, for lack of a better word, and then just jump into like, hey, I'm starting my own thing? Yeah.
Well, that was probably the scariest couple of years of my life, and I joke about it, but it's actually true. It's actually during those 3 or 4 years when I lost my hair. and what's funny is even today, once a week, I'll have a dream that it all falls apart, and I have to go back to the job that I resigned at.
Oh my God.
And I'm 50
like
years.
Tail between your legs?
Yeah. It's exactly that. And I'm 50 years old, and this is still a dream that I have. And I think everyone reaches these very scary, change points in their lives. And for me, I was about 28 years old, and I got offered a promotion. I worked in corporate America.
Yeah. That was my first question.
Yeah, I was in corporate America, and I got offered this really great promotion I was working hard towards. However, I needed to move across the country. I was going to work at corporate, and it was kind of one of those, I knew in my mind if I took this job, it was a one-way street because it was going to be a very comfortable lifestyle. It would have been a very nice job working for a wonderful company that I loved.
And I'm sure, I mean, it sounds like you're probably making good money. It wasn't, making some minimum wage where you're like, I have to do something. This isn't working. There was definitely a career path where you could make a lot of money, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was great. It was exciting, but it was also, I knew I was at this crossroad, and I knew that if I took that job, that I was never going to go and pursue my dreams. So I went into the company on Monday morning. I said, listen, thank you so much for the opportunity and the promotion and stuff, but I'm not going to take the promotion, and I resign. And
was it something I said?
Yeah, it was shocking, right? And my wife, she's always been blindly supportive of me. I mean, blindly supportive. Yeah. She's wonderful, but she married me when I was a pizza driver, right? And so
she didn't have high hopes.
Yeah, she's like, yeah, whatever,
That's true love.
Yeah. And she just believed the whole time, blindlessly believed in me, and was like, yeah, great, we'll figure it out. And she worked at the time, so she's like, and that was part of the plan too, was that she would work and help us get started, and she was like, well, we'll see what happens, right? But she didn't have any grand illusions of what it could be. Yeah. She just wanted me to pursue my dreams. And so she knew that's what I wanted. And when I resigned, honestly, I think it was over 2 years before we actually started making money. And so those first 2 years.
And that's normal, right? For anyone thinking about it, you've got to have something put away.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I hate about social media today. It's one of the reasons I actually started my podcast, because there's too many, TikTokers out there that are like, oh, I made $35,000 before 11 a.m. flipping NFTs, and it's like people get these very unrealistic expectations of what it takes to build something of value. Now, it's not to say you couldn't take some money out of your 401k and bet it all on black, right?
Yeah.
And, all of a sudden you go and win, but that doesn't make you an entrepreneur. You haven't built anything.
Well, and that's what people don't understand. Well, with social media too, you just see you see the success or the
highlights,
fluffed success. Because people, you can just say whatever you want on social media, and if someone sees that, they're like, oh my gosh, they're super successful. Not necessarily. For sure, right? Because it's all about bragging about yourself on social media. But behind the scenes, the blood, sweat, and tears, we see that in real estate with young realtors coming in, kind of same thing, where you have to have money set aside because you're, like you said with your product, you don't have customers right away. Like, hey, I'm going to be a realtor. It's and a line out the door. Oh my gosh, thank goodness, because I was just waiting for you to get your real estate license. Probably doesn't happen. So that's true with social media. It's you just don't believe everything that you see, or maybe you do believe it, but understand what went behind it. And it's not all a bright, shiny object.
Yeah, I think it's really discouraging to entrepreneurs when they flip on social media and they see people talking about all these successes and wearing these watches and driving these cars and getting on private jets. I mean, come on. There's, if all of that is true.
Right, you have to figure that out first.
There's blood, sweat, and tears behind it. And really, that's what people need to hear. That's a story that actually people want to hear. They want to be able to relate. They want to be able to understand. And so one of the things I always talk about in my podcast, I say, hey, listen, I only know the hard way, right? And so people a lot of times are like, oh, Devon, hey, can we go out to coffee? I'd love to pick your brain about this business idea. And I'm like, yeah, great. So I get all excited. We'll go out to coffee. And I'm listening and we're talking and stuff. And I can tell they kind of zone out. And I'm like, why are they not excited about what we're talking about? This is great. And I realize it's because they're waiting to hear this magic word where all of a sudden they're a bazillionaire.
Right, and or they just want to they want you to rub off on them, like osmosis, and be like, okay, well, I've got the magic ticket, or no, golden ticket. Yeah. But that's true. And then they maybe see oh my gosh, look what he's done, look how much time he's put, look how many sacrifices he's made, and I don't think it's for everybody. I don't think everybody has the stomach for it.
Yeah, that's what most of the time I spend talking about is hey, this is at the end of the day, no one knows whether your idea is good or bad, because in all honesty, the best ideas I think I've ever had in business have been the biggest failures. Some of the worst ideas I think I've ever had have actually been tremendous successes, right? So I don't think anyone can sit down and go, you have a great idea. But what you have to realize, and so the time that I spend with them is talking about execution and the hard work behind it. Yeah. And I think that's when you lose a lot of people. And they're like, oh, well, I thought, you just became, had this incredible idea. Jeff Bezos did not have a great idea. Yeah. He sold freaking books out of his garage. You know, it was like used books online, right? How exciting is that? Anyone could start that.
Right.
But he grew it, and there was execution. He grew it into Amazon.
Right.
You know, it could have simply been this, you know, family-run business, and he made enough money, put the kids through college, and maybe sold it to his uncle someday or something.
Comfortable, right? A comfortable, maybe mediocre, life.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, depending on. And I think some people are completely fine with that. Like, once they put food on the table, they're happy. They're not looking for more. That's probably not the heart of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and I think you're also not building something there,
right?
Right. You're creating a paycheck on your own, and that's wonderful. But that's truly like a lifestyle business.
Right.
An entrepreneur is going to build something of value that, you know, can be either sold, you know, scalable, handed down to somebody else. You know, it shouldn't just be about you. And I think a lot of times, people, when they build their businesses, the business stops at them. And if you're going to create something of value, it has to be worth something if you're not there.
Exactly. You can take yourself out of it, and it's still going to run just as good, maybe even better when you're there. And that's hard. That was something in real estate. It was hard for us because we were in the day-to-day operation, and so we wanted to go to that next level of having a team, having a business that would kind of run itself. But that takes a lot of I don't know, for Mike, for sure, he's a control freak. And so it was like, hey, there are people who can replace you. You are replaceable. You're not that great. Wow. You know, I remember I was in a seminar, and someone who wrote, Steve Chater, who wrote, what the heck is the book called? No, well, he wrote Hold. But anyway, he was one of the offers from, I'm going to get in trouble for this. But anyway, I was in a seminar, and he said, it was right when we were growing our business, he said, and then this is going to tell you years ago, because he said, well, if I'm out of town and someone calls and says, hey, I want to buy $1 million house, just 1 million. Now the market's changed. Right. But you should be able to go to anyone on your team and say, and like literally give them the football and go, hey, run with it, and not be like super nervous, worried that they're not going to do as good a job as you. And I thought that was just eye-opening. I'm like, that's because you have to look for people that are as good. And I think you said this in one of your podcasts, as good or better than you, and let them run with it and have that confidence in your team. And so there's probably 100 people in the room, and he had asked first, okay, who would do that today? You got a phone call, you can't make it, you're out of town. Like, who would pass it off? And not one person raised their hand. And a lot of them had teams already. So I thought that just stuck with me, and I'm like, okay, that's about building a business or building people or building something that talented people want to be a part of.
Yeah, it's got to be bigger than you.
Yeah.
My mentor taught me this, because I would hire people and then I would kind of do their job a little bit, you know? And a lot of it was me, right? Like, because as an entrepreneur, you're controlling, you are, right? And so, and you take on, truly, I think this is something people you need to understand. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you literally, at the beginning, you have to do everything. Yeah. So if you think you're going to be an entrepreneur and you think, oh, I'm just going to hire people to do this, it just doesn't happen.
And I see that all the time.
Yeah. It's a huge mistake. You know, you're going to lose money. The investors are going to lose money. Everybody's going to lose money. You have to, in the beginning, you have to be able to do everything. But then there comes this transition when you got to decide, okay, now I need to be working on X, so someone else needs to be able to do Y. Yeah. And so I would hire people to do Y, but then I would go back and do their job. Yeah. And my mentor, he yelled at me, and he was really stern. He's like, if you're paying them and you're hiring well, they should do that job better than you, because that's what they do. That's what they're going to focus on. They're a pro in that area. Right. And I was like, wow. And he's like, and your job is to hold them accountable. Right. And so you have to go up as a leader and be able to say, listen, I'm now not going to do your job. I'm going to hold you accountable to do your job and to do your job better than me. And that's how the whole company elevates. Yeah. Everybody goes up, they elevate, right? Because they want the next opportunity, they want the next promotion. If everything stays status quo, if they're just doing as good as you did, nobody's going up. Right. And so you have to apply the pressure so that they elevate and that they grow. And then obviously it's new levels, new devils, you know. But that's what I learned. It is very difficult to watch someone do something that you disagree with and know that they're going to fail and let them do it. Yeah, and there's a lesson in that, right? There is, yeah. And then when they do, they have to get better, right? So, but like, that's hard. And I sit there and I'm like, and I actually have this conversation with my leaders. I'll say, listen, I disagree with this, but this is your department, and I'm going to let you run with it. And I said, I'm never going to be a I told you so guy, but at the end, if this doesn't work out, I want you to own it and I want you to learn from it. And if you're right, I want to learn too, right? But, we have those kind of candid conversations about ownership and responsibility and owning your decisions. And like I said, it's designed to say, this is your football.
Yeah.
You're going to run with it, but you also have accountability back to me.
Right.
So.
Yeah, you're the coach.
Yeah.
Well, and it's one thing that you're talking about that's really interesting to me is you are, as far as like giving someone the football and letting them do their job, but you have businesses like all over the country, right? So you don't have that, you're not a micromanager. You can't be, right?
Yeah, it's funny. We actually talk about this all the time. I always say, listen, it's not micromanagement, it's just management, right?
Yeah.
People are always, everyone's like, don't micromanage me. And I'm like, well, the only people that normally ever say that are the people that aren't doing their jobs, right?
Yeah, they're feeling a little bit of pressure.
Exactly. But what we've learned, the way that I've done this, and I don't think this works for everybody, but this really works well for our companies, is we become very data-driven. And so I can be anywhere in the country. I can even be on vacation. And in the morning, we get reports from every single department. And within each department, all the individuals report to the department head. The department head aggregates all of those reports and then sends everything to me and our COO or CFO or whomever's appropriate. And then we basically review those reports. And from that, if the analytics are correct and you're not over-reporting, to your point, you're not over-micromanaging, but you're reporting on the KPIs, the key, those key metrics that you need, I can know from, I could be on an airplane somewhere and go, hey, this department's broke. Send 1 or 2 emails, make a phone call, and we can solve something right away. And you're not waiting for 2 months later to go, I wonder why things aren't working well.
Yeah.
Because you're getting numbers and metrics every single day. And so for me, that's been, and again, my mentor taught me this. He's like, if you have reporting around this, you can be anywhere in the country. And in some ways, it's better because I'm a snoopy, put my finger in everything kind of person. And if I was on site all the time, I'd be like poking at things that I shouldn't be poking at, right?
Yeah.
So this is a way, again, to let the leaders lead. I step back, but at the same time, you have the metrics and the controls. So, you basically get a scoreboard, as the day goes on to make sure that we're on track. You don't have to wait, like I said, 90 days to realize, hey, the company's out of whack. You can find out by lunchtime what's wrong.
Well, and I love that because the first thing I'm thinking of is, and it's not a personal thing. It's not a personality thing, right? When you're dealing with people, it's like the numbers don't lie. So I could love you or you could not be my favorite person, but it is what it is.
Absolutely.
And that's a hard thing, I think, especially when you have to have hard conversations. Like I've always been someone, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but I know you're that way too.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
Well, I honestly, I used to be, but I think over the years, I've realized that by not having those hard conversations, you actually hurt the person more. Yeah. And having the numbers makes the conversations easier. And so we're very, I really talk to my managers all the time about like issues and problems and taking things head on. And one of the very first conversations I have with every single manager or leader in the company is, hey, if you know about a problem, and I don't know about that problem, or the rest of the leadership team doesn't know about that problem, that's your problem. Yeah. But if you know about it and you tell us, it's our problem. And so really having this kind of transparency allows people to, number one, be vulnerable. Like, hey, listen, no one's expected to be perfect, but they are expected to be vulnerable and transparent. And so and then we work through issues and problems together. And so even like stuff where like people aren't hitting their numbers, again, it's very transparent. So everyone sees everybody's numbers every single day. So you can't really hide from it. Right. And now you can sit down and have these conversations and say, listen, obviously your numbers aren't where they'd like to be. Why, what can we do to help get you there? And oftentimes I find out that we have people that are just plain miscast. There have been very few situations over, the years where it's not like the person's just not working or I'm sorry, let me rewind. Not capable, right? So there are people that are in the wrong position. But I'm sorry, let me rewind all that. Sorry.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Over the years, the people that I've let go are the people that don't work. Okay. Now, if we find someone, their KPIs aren't there, all right, and we're looking at them or we're meeting with them, it's one of three things. Either A, they don't work, in which case you're gone.
Right.
B, they're miscast, in which case that's on us. We have them in the wrong position.
Sure.
Now, we might not have a good position for them at all within our company, but it's not their fault. It's our fault.
Right.
And so we want to help that person go find a good position at a company that they can succeed in.
Is that, I think that was on your podcast where it was like firing someone before Christmas.
Oh my gosh, that was terrible.
Okay, so I was telling the team about it, and like literally, like everyone came to me and they're like, because I think I had posted it or shared it, and everyone's like, "Well, is this about me?" Like I had like 4 people like ask me on the side. I'm like, well, not right now, but we'll talk right before Christmas. No. But I thought it was really great, and it's just how you have that delivery in that conversation. It was like, hey, like you said, like it's easy to say, you know what, when we hired you, or the KPI or whatever, it's just we saw something, and maybe it's not you, maybe you're a hard worker, but it's just not a great fit. But I know someone else who might have that great fit for you.
And if we, in the case of what you're talking about, when I had to fire someone before Christmas, I should have done that like 2 years ago, right? And what happened was he ended up it was such a bad a blunder at that particular time that if I didn't do something, the rest of the team was going to lose faith in me. So I had to do something. But like if I knew it, like I knew this person was in the wrong position. Yeah. But I kept delaying it. I didn't want to have these conversations.
Maybe you liked that person.
I did.
That's what's hard.
One of my favorite people.
See, that makes it that much harder.
But if I had, and what happened was after we finally let him go, he sent me a message like 6 months later, like, "Hey, I'm at this new company. I love it. I'm in this position that works great for me."
Yeah.
And I was like, as happy as I was for him then, it made me, I'm like, I'm not going to have to learn this lesson again. I'm not going to avoid these hard conversations, because if I had done this 2 years earlier, he would have been 2 years further along in his career at a place where he was thriving, instead of me being a wussy and not willing to have the hard conversation.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a blinder, I feel like, that we have on our brains. Like, or that you like this person so much that the only place that they're really going to do good is within your organization or something. And like you feel that responsibility, but it's not really up to us.
No, it's not. And I think it is. And the thing is we want to, like, everybody wants to be liked, right? Yeah. And you're never going to like let somebody go, and they're not going to call you up. Like to be clear, he didn't call me up like 6 months later and thank me. He did call me up and tell me, "Hey, I'm in a great spot," and I was really happy for him. Right.
Better than when I was with you.
Right. But like, this is just the burden that you have to bear as a leader, is that sometimes and the other thing is we don't have to be perfect, right? But we have to care, and we have to be willing to put ourselves out there and make the hard decisions as best as we think possible. And as I look back on my career, I've made a ton of decisions, but I've always tried to do them for the right reasons and the right heart. And when I put my head on the pillow at night, I'm like, am I right before God and man? It doesn't mean, am I right?
Right.
Because I'm not always right. A lot of times I'm not. But
your heart was in the right place.
Exactly. And I think when we cower from, and I say cower because that's what I did, is I was afraid of having that conversation because it was just uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable. That's a great, and then your heart gets pounding and you feel a little sick. Speaking from personal experience anyway, it is hard. And so it's easier to just like kick the can down the road, I feel like. Or kick the can down the road hoping that the problem will solve itself. Like, how often does that happen? Never.
And it's certainly not without addressing it.
Right.
I've done some really big mistakes with this, where like you have this uber talented person, but they have kind of a toxicity with them, right?
And that's actually another podcast that I watched. It's like when you have that talented person that's toxic, what is it worth keeping them if it's spreading throughout your team? Yeah,
so. And what I'll do is I'll do these things, right, where like, and as I'm talking, probably this is going to resonate with a lot of people, where you actually start building your business and your org chart around that person. Yeah. Right? They're kind of this immovable object that everyone has to work around. We can't make, Bob mad. It's a Tuesday afternoon. He's not in a good mood, or, you know what I mean? Like,
no, we know.
Yeah. And so you start creating these little workarounds to work around people. Yeah. And I promised myself that I will never do this, and I still continually make this mistake. But when you start creating these workarounds, and then all of a sudden, like your org chart gets dysfunctional, your decision making becomes weird. You have to have meetings after meetings, right? Because you have one person in there, you have to talk about things a little differently, and all of a sudden things become like the definition of dysfunction.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, wait, why? So the people that are like that typically are very talented. Yeah. And they know that they are, and people have allowed them to have bad behavior over the years. You see this all the time in sports, right? Yeah. Like those wide receiver, right? That everyone's like, he bounces from team to team, but he scores 1 billion touchdowns, right? But it's toxic, right? And it never works out. Right. And so, like for me, I'm like, I will like try my darndest to meet with that person, explain to them exactly the issues, explain to them their value, but let them know that I'm not willing to do workarounds, right? Sure. And I would love to tell you that, that's the perfect solution. Most of the time it doesn't work. Most of the time they end up leaving. That was my next question.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that. Now, does it work?
No, most of the time they end up leaving. Yeah. Yeah. And I would tell you, again, that what I've noticed, if you do put that pressure and you do have that accountability, either A, they're going to leave on their own, which, good, fine, right? Or B, they're now held accountable to change, in which case you write them up, they go on a PIP, and then eventually they're out, right? Right. Or C, they do change, right? But it's probably, in my case, more people have left than have stayed. Sure. Because they're just, like I said, they're not used to people applying that pressure because they have so much talent that people are willing to work around them. Now, that just doesn't work for my organizations.
Right. No. Right. It makes sense. Well, because you've got the bigger picture. Yeah. You're looking in for the long run.
Yeah. I would say one other thing is I've noticed that when those folks do leave, and you actually start peeling back the onion, you find out how many other people have been hurt during the process, right? That either they are about to leave, right? Because of that person, right? Or they have somehow poisoned their minds. By that person, they started creating like little civil wars within your organization. And so for me, what I have learned about that is the sooner you deal with it, it's like cancer, right? The sooner you can get to it, the better off you are before it spreads and causes issues. So.
For sure. Well, so I liked that one. So thank you for elaborating on it too. So there's another one I wanted to talk about, like actually two more, if that's okay, of your podcast. Yeah. So it was Crush Your Competition. It made me think about something that happens in our industry a lot with real estate is, we have to sell ourselves, right? And so constantly, you have to be on social media. There's tons of people who don't even like being on social media, but it almost seems like you have to, because if you're not seen on social media, then people think you're not working. But it's one of those things where you see people and they're, bragging or whatever. Humble bragging, I don't know. But I don't even know like what the right word is. But then I see other people and it really brings people down. We'll have agents in the office go, oh my gosh, did you see what they're doing? Like, how do I compete with that? But I'm like, but it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. You don't know the blood, sweat, and tears. And you don't know how much is a little bit exaggerated, but you should use that as fuel to launch yourself, right? And to grow and be competitive. I remember like award ceremonies, like that's another one. And they happen in most organizations, and you see people, or you're thinking, I'm not going to get an award or all this, or you don't want to even go because it depresses some people, I feel like. Instead of using that to fuel you and say, okay, look what they're doing, like be excited for them, and then have a goal to even exceed what they're doing. Yeah. But that really resonated with me too.
Yeah, that one is something I learned over the years. So I'm highly competitive. I love coaching. I love everything. I love sports. I love. It's one of the reasons I love business, because I feel like every day is a game. But when I first got in, no matter what industry you get in, right, you're new at some point. And then just like you said, you're going to compare yourself to people who've done it for 10 years or have a bigger budget, or, in our case, a lot of times there's people that have, outside investors, and, you're trying to compete with them. And every year everyone looks at their numbers and you're like, oh, we're only this big and they're that big, or they're a public company and we're a private company. What are we going to do? And so what I realized is crushing the competition to me is crushing myself where I was a year ago. And so I was on the treadmill, and my kids laugh at me. And so if you ever come to my house and I'm working out, I keep the door closed, but the kids will stand outside the door and they'll laugh because like the last 5 minutes of my run, they'll hear me yelling at myself because there's a mirror as I'm running. And I like start yelling at myself like, come on, Stan, you only got 5 minutes. Like, and I'm screaming at myself and I'm yelling at myself to push myself.
Yeah.
And the reason is there's, you know, I do the Peloton thing and there's this PR, right? There's always, you can race against other people. I'm not beating other people generally, but I am going for that PR, right? Like it tells you where you're at, like against your PR. And I'm like, I've got to beat that guy. Because that guy is me. That's where I was, a month ago. Right. And so for us in our company, like we don't compare ourselves like size-wise or anything like to, a public company, right? Or even other private companies, because everybody has their own niche, they have their own margins, they have their own play. So what we've learned to do is to compare ourselves against ourselves. Right. And so when I say crush our competition, it's like we have to beat ourselves from last quarter. Right. And if you do that, think about that. Like if you can just every single quarter beat your prior quarter, it doesn't matter if you're 2 years into your career or 20 years into your career. Yeah. You're going to build an empire. Right. If you just beat last quarter, if that's all that you do every quarter over quarter, you beat it, you're going to build an empire. Now at 2 years, you might be thinking, well, geez, I still can't compare to someone, down the street. But you're going to, right? And you consistently do that month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year. That growth, beating your PR from the year before you're going to blow up. You're going to be amazing. And that's what people don't do is either A, they get, like you talked about earlier, they get comfortable, right? Yeah. At year 10, they get very comfortable and all of a sudden that is their PR and that's where they stay. Right. And that's fine. But if you want to build something of value, if you want to, crush your competition, beat last year, beat last quarter, beat last month. And that's what we always challenge ourselves to do. Well,
when you're focused on yourself and you are beating yourself, like you said, you're going to launch yourself past so many other, if other businesses, you're just going to launch without even trying, right?
Yeah. And then you're not walking around with this like envy, right?
Yes.
And that is, it sucks, right? Because one of the downsides of being competitive is that you can become an envious person. And, and I've been there, right? Like I've been like, oh, look at their company or they hired these people or they have this money or they have that account. And you're comparing yourself against people that you don't like, you should be cheering for them, right? You should be excited for them. And instead you walk around feeling bad about yourself because you're comparing yourself to them instead of yourself to last quarter. Right. If you beat yourself last quarter, you're going to eventually beat everybody.
It's a huge win.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in the meantime, you can be excited for other people too, right? Because what happened, I mean, this is the evil, gross side that we have inside of us, right?
And sometimes it's natural, I feel like, because I'll catch myself and I'm like, well, gross. Like I'm disgusting. Like I'll smack myself and be like, this is amazing what they're doing. And when I grew up as a little ballerina, that was one thing I had an instructor tell me is like, when you're in class, you need to be watching what every single other person is doing. And you need to find out what they're doing that you really like and take it. And it's just be aware of what people are doing. Don't be envious or jealous or any of those things, but just because you have the opportunity to do anything you want. So if someone else is doing something you like pull that from them. It's like, the rip and duplicate, right?
Yeah. I had a friend in high school, and he was a year older than me. And I remember all the girls loved him. All the guys thought he was super cool.
Are you talking about yourself? I knew a guy.
Yeah. But I was like, what is it about him? Because he's not that special. He wasn't like the captain of the football team. Yeah. He wasn't 6'5". Yeah. I mean, he didn't have that look. And so I was studying this person because I was I was exactly that. Like the ballerina. I'm like, whatever he has, I'm going to figure out and I'm going to learn. Yeah. And I figured out what he did is he always smiled and he laughed at everybody's jokes.
Even if they weren't funny.
Even if they weren't funny. And so I started.
You're like, can I do that?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to see if I can do that. So like I tried it for like 2 weeks. I smiled constantly. I laughed at everyone's jokes. And sure enough, like, I'm like, it worked.
Animal magnetism just came out.
Everyone responded. And that's when I learned, I'm like, people are like, oh, I have to be myself. No, you don't. You are yourself, but you're adding things. Right. You're learning things as you grow, right? And we can learn all these little skills and traits from our competition, from our friends, from our neighbors, from our family. Take the best out of everybody. It doesn't mean you're not being genuine. It means you're growing and you're learning and you're evolving as a professional and as a human being.
Well, and you're self-evaluating.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that just as we get older and, family and friend conflicts, I feel like. And I see kind of a difference in people where I see some people who are just like more apt to have to be right, the little bit more on the negative side or angry and not wanting to listen to anyone else, where I feel like the first thing we should do in any sort of situation or conflict is like look inside, and it's work. It's so much work. And I feel like people just aren't willing to do that work. Just when you were saying you met with someone with coffee and the eyes glossed over as soon as you're talking about that work, it takes a commitment, and it takes a commitment to grow and be a better person, whether that's taking things from other people or just looking inside yourself going, like I sometimes do when I start to get that envious, like, oh my gosh, look what they're doing. I'm like, wait, no. Where I think other people just stay on that path to be like, oh gosh, can you believe what they're doing? Because even when they're successful, you've got to find a reason why they're more successful than you. And I feel like we tend to like want to pull people down to make ourselves feel better.
Yeah, I definitely have that dark side too, and I hate living there.
Yeah.
And someone taught me.
But that's the thing. But you're willing to work.
Yeah, someone taught me a trick. They said if you celebrate others' victories, right, that you get to share in their victories, so you get to double your own victories, and half your pain.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was really good, right?
Really
like,
good.
because if you're, instead of competing against this person, you're loving them and really genuinely happy for them and genuinely care for their losses and vice versa. Like, think about that. Like, now you get to, when they have a great victory, they close a huge account or they buy a new house or whatever, you get to share in that. It's like you're celebrating with them. And when you have a pain or they have a pain, they help you share that pain too, and you cut it in half. And
I love that.
Yeah, it's not mine. Someone shared it with me. I thought that's the person that I want to be. Yeah. That's where I want to live, and I have to constantly battle against that with myself. So
sometimes it always doesn't come naturally all the time.
Yeah, it's the other thing I think that's hard is being a leader and entrepreneur is nobody wants to call you on your BS. Yeah. Like they don't like you said, everyone laughs at your jokes. Ha ha! You're so funny, right? You're so.
I do that with Mike.
And so, for me, I've tried, and I'd love to tell you I'm perfect at this, but I've really tried to let myself be in a position where people can disagree with me and are celebrated kind of for disagreeing with me.
Right.
Now, I do want to have very candid conversations. Like, here's why I see this, and here's where they see that. But like, I want to have an environment where people are right as much as I am, right? Or there's a give and take. And it becomes very difficult. And that, talk about personal growth, like you have to be willing to hear the negative. I had one of the things I shared is I got like ripped in an exit interview. Like this person left the company and, there's,
in an exit interview of someone leaving.
Someone left our company, And, they called out a few things. I'm like, oh, that's good. And they called out like specifically like me, like boom, 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 boom.
Like,
and I was like,
ouch.
Yeah, it was. It was like, and, I could tell my HR director was like, oh, should I send this to him? I'm like, just send it to me. And I'm like, read it. And I'm like, okay. Right.
Wow.
And I was like, but it was right on. I mean, it was right on the nose, Really? And I was like, golly, I have to. And well, actually, let me come back. The first time I read it, I'm like, oh, screw them. They don't know,
Bye-bye.
Yeah, good riddance, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then I was like, you know what? I need to learn from this because, like, they were right, And I was like, I've got to be willing to stay in that place where that I welcome being wrong and that I want to change that, right? And it's not easy because and if you don't, no one's going to challenge you. Right. They're just going to bow down and be like, oh, okay, great. Well, this is what the boss wants. Right. And so, and then again, you kind of go back to an organization that's only as big as you.
Well, and then they probably don't have ownership, right? If they know what they say doesn't matter, then they probably aren't as invested and as excited to help grow the business.
Absolutely. And, most of the ideas that we've had over the years have not been mine,
Yeah.
And if you stay where you're so domineering that it's all about you, then that's as big as the organization gets. Why are you even hiring people? You should just be a sole contributor.
Right.
Right? And you should just go and make as much money and do as much as you can because you're not building anything.
And that happens. I mean, I see it all the time, and if it works for someone, great. But that's working 24/7, I would think.
Yeah, and I've told people that. Like, I have a couple good friends that are uber talented. But
You're talking about me again?
super talented.
Oh.
And they...
Just not moderately talented, Andrew.
He so it wasn't that, it's not you.
Okay.
He worked for me, and he ended up striking out on his own and stuff. And he's tried to do a couple different things. He's asked me like, "Hey, do you think I should do this?" And I'm like, "Honestly, dude, I think that you should do something that's you,
Yeah.
right? Because you're very talented, but you're not really a people person,
Yeah.
right? You're not. People generally don't work well with you, right? You're a genius. You do great things, but like understand who you are, right? And own that, and
Sure.
and go and be that person, right? Create an incredible product. Like a lot of engineers are this way, right? Where they can create something amazing, right? But like you probably aren't the person who should lead an organization. And I think all these people end up even miscasting themselves.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to do something that's not what they're made to do.
Right.
They'd be better off creating 4 more products.
Right.
And letting someone else run the organization or something. But our pride gets in the way. It's way too much.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so last podcast I want to talk about, because it hit home again, is Ashley, our lovely marketing director and operations, came in to our organization and immediately was like, "Well, where's your calendar?" And I'm like, "I don't know, Google Calendar." And she's like, "Well, there's nothing on it." And she's like, "What's going on in this place?" I'm like, "Well, we have so much going on." Blah, blah, blah. So it was like fighting tooth and nail, especially for everyone to get on board with a calendar. And it's something that I knew, it's always preached about time blocking, everything like that. But I'm like, I kind of was letting my day dictate what happened and not me dictating my day. And so, of course, she pointed this out to me. And she's like, "Oh, look at this. What about this calendar thing?" I'm like, I know. The great news is we love the calendar. We live by the calendar now. It took a little bit of time to get everybody on board. But then Mike was telling me that Elon Musk, he has his calendar down to every 5 minutes. Even lunch. Mike had told me, and I'd read an article about it, and I think Bill Gates was the same way. Like, how do you run your calendar?
So I wouldn't say I'm down to the 5 minutes, but literally everything that I do is on my calendar.
Yeah.
And this is being a product of being my mother's son. Like, she was just on me, like, put on your calendar, right? When I was young, she'd hand me those little ones you get from the bank, and you'd have to write it down. And she would make sure that I was writing my homework down and when my exams were and everything. And she forced me to do that. And it's one of the best things that happened because, what I realized is that a great leader and or entrepreneur is going to have goals, beat that competition, right?
Yes.
But in order to beat the goals, you have to have a plan to beat your goal, right? So if my goal is to beat last quarter, what's my plan to beat the quarter, right? And so you write up goals. Well, that plan needs to go into your calendar.
Yeah.
Along with the rest of your life, right? Because you have a family, you have things that you need to do, and like there's no way that goal is just going to happen.
Right.
I was on an interview yesterday. We were talking, and we were talking about success, and we talked about if you have success but you don't know how you got there, that's luck.
Oh, I love it.
You know? But if you have success and you know how you got there, that's reproducible. That's not luck. That's reproducible.
And it was probably written down.
Yeah, and exactly. It's in your calendar.
Yeah.
You have a goal written down, and then your calendar is like, hey, if I'm going to hit this goal, I need to do this on Monday. Yeah. By the way, on Tuesday, I have to be here because I have a personal obligation. On Wednesday, I'm going to be here. I want to work out. And you start putting all of these different things into your calendar.
Right.
It blows my mind when I ask someone, I'm like, hey, can you go out to lunch next Wednesday? And they're like, sure. I'm like, how do you know? You didn't even look at your calendar, right?
Like, how do you know?
Exactly. I'm like, you like, if you're going to be highly productive and you're going to hit those goals, you have to have a plan to do it, and that plan needs to be in the calendar. And then as the month goes on, as the quarter goes on, you need to assess, am I meeting my goals? Am I meeting my obligations? Am I where I need to be?
Based on your activities, right?
Absolutely. It all goes together. So you can't have goals without a plan to get there, and you can't have a plan to get there if it's not in your calendar.
Well, and I think one thing that's really hard for someone who is an entrepreneur, small business owner, even like a sole proprietorship, is you can have things on the calendar, but what's to stop you from going, I don't feel like doing that, right? And that was one thing with like Ashley, it's like, or like a meeting in the office. We'd have a meeting, but then it's like, well, we're here all day, so we may not necessarily meet at 10, and then it kind of gets pushed off. So accountability to that calendar, if it's in there, then that needs to happen. And that's one thing that it's just so easy to like brush something off, especially when I don't have someone behind me saying, Ann, like, or my boss is saying, hey, you said it's in the calendar, like you need to do it. So that's why I think it's really hard, especially for like an owner, a small business owner, is like, okay, it's in the calendar and you have to. So maybe an accountability calendar partner?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me, I live my life through my calendar. And so it's actually percolated down through our company. Like, I mean, it's not to say people don't cancel meetings or reschedule them, right? And it, I liken it, because I'm a coach, I liken it to our game plan, right? Like when we go, if I'm going to be a responsible coach, going into the game, I need to have a game plan. I need to have done some scouting. I need to know what my formation looks like against this particular team. I need to know what we need to be worried about. I need to know what their weaknesses are. And I need a game plan for that. And I need to lay that out for my team. Everyone needs to understand it. Everyone needs to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And that's kind of what a calendar does. Now, once the game starts, right, you're going to modify, right? But if you don't have that structure in place already, it's going to be chaos, right? And so that's what that I've used my calendar as a framework to hold myself accountable. Again, it's not my religion, right? But I stick to it as best I can, and then we kind of modify as the game transitions throughout the week.
Right, and you've implemented this over the years, and so you know it works.
Yeah.
So you're not guessing.
My wife and I actually sit down once a week on Sunday afternoon, and we call it calendaring. And so I will sync my calendar with her calendar, and we generally do about 4 to 5 months out. And so, obviously, because we have more than just business, we have family and, hopefully a social life and some other things that you really want to be able to do. And if you if you're running hard, like that trip to Europe that you've always wanted to take,
yes,
it's not gonna happen. Right? Like you need to sit down and say, we're going to Europe within the next 90 days. And then you're gonna look at your calendar, and honestly, there's not gonna be a time that works.
Yeah.
But you make a time,
right,
and you move some stuff around, and you make it happen. And that's how you're able to kind of quote unquote do it all, right? But you can't do it all. It just doesn't happen by waking up in the morning. If you want to go to Europe, you gotta put it on the calendar.
Put it on the calendar. I love that. And Europe is on my list. You know. So what would be 3 things that you would get? So someone who's listening and saying, hey, I'm in this corporate job and I want to make the move to either a small business owner and then launch that into being an entrepreneur. What are 3 things that would be takeaways that they could implement right now?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing I would say is you get your personal finances in order, right? I'm very aggressive. People are like, hey, should I start a business? I'm always like, yeah, sure, do it, right? That's my answer to anything. However, people that don't have their personal finances in order, I tell them you're crazy. Don't even think it, because if you can't run your personal finances and get yourself organized and have a savings and paying bills on time and not be over extended,
right?
You could blow up personally, but blowing up personally and business-wise, I mean, you're going to blow your life up.
Right.
It's just too much. The first thing I would tell them is get your personal finances in order. Second thing I would tell them is get your family together, right? Because this isn't like an individual.
Right.
My wife, like I said, we had a baby, we had diapers, we had bills to pay. She knew when I started my company that she was going to be working, perhaps forever, right?
Right.
And and that she was responsible. She needed to make this much money. We had to have her health insurance.
Yeah.
And so we kind of planned our children. We planned where we were going to live. We planned to make sure that we had a house before we did this. And,
Right.
because once I did it, like our credit was probably going to look weird,
Well, yeah, and then you go to qualify for a mortgage. They're like, okay, well, what's your income? Zero?
Absolutely.
Probably not going to work.
Yeah, and so you got to have those deep conversations with your family, right?
Yeah.
And everybody needs to be on the same page. And again, they don't. You can't tell them the highlights, right? You can't give them the highlight reel, like, oh, we're gonna do this and we're gonna make millions.
Well, like what you said at the beginning, you had no predisposition of how successful you were going to be. You didn't tell your wife like, hey, well, I'm thinking, at 2 years, we're going to make this amount of money to get them excited. You were like, I don't know.
Yep.
We'll just try.
Yeah. we actually planned to make none, right?
Yeah.
We planned so that we would live off of her salary.
Right.
And so anyways, that's what I said. First off, get your personal finances in order. Secondly, get your family
on board.
And like I said, the realistic on board, right? Not the dream on board, how you're all going to be flying private, right? Like the the realistic view of what's going to happen over the next couple of years. And then the last thing I would tell you, and this is what probably people aren't going to guess, I'm going to say this, be a great employee.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, if you're not, if your personal finances aren't in order and your family's not in order and you're not currently the best at your job, why are you going to go be better for somebody else?
Right.
Like, if you're going to be great, right now you're on somebody else's dime. Right now they're paying you to learn. Right now they're paying you to be the best. If you're late to work, if you call off sick, if you're not the top producer at your company and in your organization or whatever you do,
you kind of have no business.
You got no business, right?
Yeah.
Right now you're on someone else's dime.
Yeah.
Right? So, like I said, I'm sure, that's why I said people, after they meet with me, they're like, oh, that was boring. I wanted to hear about how to make millions of dollars, right?
Like tomorrow, yeah.
But this is the truth. Get your personal finances in order. Get your family on the same page and be incredible at your current job. Be the absolute best because it's on someone else's dime. You can make mistakes now, right? And you're going to learn how to be a great business person working for somebody else so that when you leave, you got it. I mean, you know what you're doing. You already know that you're a professional. You're on time. You've got the basics down.
And don't start a business because you don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
Right? I see that all the time. It's like, hey, in the day-to-day, they're getting, with real estate, it's like, well, I'm tired of showing houses, or I'm tired of this is crap. I'm tired of making cold calls, all that stuff. And so I see this all the time. Like, you know what? I'm going to start a business and then I'm going to hire people to do all the things I don't want to do that I've never done and I'm not particularly good at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's terrible. It's terrible. Like, how would you want people to respect you, look up to you, learn from you, grow from you? It's such a disservice. I would feel sorry for anyone under that kind of lack of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to blow your life up, right?
Yeah.
You're going to hurt other people along the way.
For sure.
They're going to be disillusioned. You're going to sell them a dream. They're going to come work for you, and then you're going to blow up. They're going to blow up, and
what you do suddenly affects other people, their family, their kids, and that's a lot on your conscience.
Absolutely.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we close, I just have to say or ask you one thing because it's so important to you and it's so who you are. But can you tell us just a little bit about your faith?
So I'm a Christian. I was in first grade. I kind of raised my hand and did the Baptist thing, and
I choose Jesus.
Yeah, I was super excited, and I haven't always lived for him. There was definitely a time in college when I kind of walked away, but as then my wife and I kind of had a turning point, and we came back to the Lord together, and it was amazing. Really what he's done. And as I look back on, we talked about it before, I've never, if I was to go through and explain each and every one of my businesses, you'd be like, well, geez, that's not that great of an idea. And nothing we've ever done has been that great of an idea, but I truly feel that I've been blessed. And, over the course of years, as I look back, I'm like, the hand of God has been on our business, on our family, and has directed us. But I would tell you that people that think, oh, great, well, I'm going to wait for God to do something in my life. I don't think that's how it works. I think for me, at least, it worked when I was moving. Yeah. When I had faith to step out and do something, when I had faith to resign. Like I said, I didn't have a good idea. I never even sold anything that I thought I was going to sell.
Yeah.
But I had the faith to step out, and I was moving, and then God could direct me.
Right.
And as I look back over my life, I feel like that's truly what God has done. He's never just said, poof, right? But he's directed. As I've moved, he's directed. As I've moved, he's directed. And so I would encourage people like that. That's how we have to live, right? I think if you're sitting there waiting for God to pick you up and physically move you into a business or move you across country or enroll you in college or whatever that dream is, that goal that you have, if you're waiting for God to do it, he's saying you move and I'll move. Right. You move, then I'll direct your path. You move, I'll direct your path. But I'm not going to do something with someone that's just sitting there.
Well, right, because they're showing a lack of faith, I would think. Yeah. You have to take that plunge.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what God's done in my life over the last several years is really he has, as I've moved, he said, Devon, that's stupid. Don't go right. I'm going to move you left.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so that's my testimony.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's so fun. Thank you for being my friend, first of all. And it's so fun because just to pick your brain and hear more about what you're doing. The last thing I'll say is when you talked about be the dumbest person in the room, and you give me that pleasure all the time. I get to be dumb, and I'm like, hey, I know that's where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be around people to grow from and learn from and challenge me to be a better person. So thank you for that.
Well, you guys are marketing geniuses
and
incredible real estate professionals. So thank you.
Thank you. Here's your $20. So if you guys want to hear more about Devon and his kind of journey and also some really great nuggets, more than nuggets, because whenever I'm listening to your podcast, I go, yeah, exactly. And I know someone like that, and I'm doing this. Oh my gosh. I love it. So you guys can download it on Spotify, Apple, lots of different platforms, but you can also find the link in our show notes. And lastly, the Schude Show is brought to you by InstaSold, Keller Williams Integrity First, your #1 resource in real estate for the Phoenix Metro Valley. You guys have a great day. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you. This was really, really fun. Thanks.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Yeah.